And here we are live. Guys, welcome. I'm Ben. And with us is
I'm
Josh.
Josh.
Yep, sorry. Yep. Josh is with us. He's excited, just as excited as I am. Welcome.
In
Yeah,
sync.
welcome to our first Mantis Meet live stream. This is so exciting. I'm very happy to be a part of this, and thank you all for joining. I'm going to have Josh introduce himself first. So, Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Josh Byrne. You've probably seen me around on the group. I'm probably more active than the other things in my life would wish that I am, but this has been one of my favorite communities on the internet overall. And I'm just really happy to get to talk to you guys some more and share my experiences with mantises, my experiences in education, and answer all sorts of questions today with Ben.
All right, and guys, you know me. I'm Ben. Hopefully, Jax Mantis. So welcome again to our stream. So today's topic, mantises in education. Some of you might be like, what? And Josh and I were just discussing earlier, mantises have just a massive educating potential. So that's kind of going to be the topic of today's live stream. I'm going to go first with Josh, and Josh, kind of tell us like what's your experiences, teaching animal education and all that good stuff using mantises.
Yeah, so my career field is zoo education, and although I'm not in it now, as a career, I do intend on getting back as soon as I can, and I still do freelance animal programs with the mantises, snakes, crabs, roaches, beetles, everything that I raise at home. And I've been doing this since middle school. I was definitely the kid who was the bug nerd. I was the kid who was trying to smuggle insects into my third grade classroom and getting in all sorts of trouble for that. And my extended family would ask my parents, like, when's he going to get out of the bug phase? And my parents would just have to say, I don't think he ever is, so you better get used to it. And since middle school, when my teachers would find out that I love the bugs and that I like talking about them, they would have me bring in animals and help teach the class when we talk about biology. And then that really continued through high school and legitimized itself in college when I worked at the Iowa State Insect Zoo. That was an outreach program where we bred over 100 species of exotic invertebrates, and we would take them out to all sorts of venues, from nursing homes to wildlife expos, and talk about insects, talk about conservation. That was where I really developed a lot of my public speaking skills, and where I got to see people who've been doing it for a long time, like relating insects to all sorts of other biological concepts. And so today, whether I'm at a zoo or at home, I will tend to do programs for classrooms and other settings, master naturalist programs and stuff too, where I'll bring a variety of animals. I'll have a topic to discuss. Sometimes it's something as simple as animal adaptations or how animals relate to their environment. And then other times it'll be a topic like pollinators, or I did a roach only program once where it was just all about cockroaches, the way they are and why they are. Um, and then I'll introduce each animal and link it to that topic. And so I found that mantises make really great intro bugs. They are some of the best insects to get people interested, to catch attention, and to help people be comfortable with something that they're already a little bit familiar with.
Yeah, so you definitely have a lot more experience than me with educating with bugs. But as some of you might know, my experiences with this is actually sending a lot of mantis kits to school and to classrooms, and I found it to be such a fun and rewarding experience. A lot of teachers reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about teaching biology or something about insects, and I heard you have these mantis kits." So I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely," and I'll try to send a mantis kit that caters to that teacher's teaching style or classroom setup or whatnot. And I'm very fortunate. They send me back pictures usually of the kids interacting with them and a big thank you photo. And it's such a rewarding experience. And the reason I do this, and again, Josh and I have been talking about this. There's so much potential with mantises in education. So there is definitely a huge apprehension to insects in the U.S. at least. I can't speak to other countries as much, but the U.S. is definitely a yuck factor when you're talking about bugs. There's just a few bugs that escape that. I think Josh. I'm thinking maybe like butterflies or something like that. That's about it.
Yep.
And then everything else is pretty much like, I'm not sure. And it's really sad because it's such a diverse part of the animal kingdom, arthropods in general. And the fact that we just look at them all with disdain, it's very disheartening. And so part of this educational outreach is to combat that. We can learn a lot from insects. I was just talking to Josh about, for example, with the way we farm, the way we keep our livestock, it has a big environmental impact. We're actually in the minority in the world that we don't eat insects. Most of the world actually eats some sort of insect in their cuisine, in their diet. So this is something I would love to explore. And it's going to be a hard sell to the public, especially here in the U.S. Not, depending on what country it is, we can talk about that later. But in the U.S., it's really hard to sell that, hey, do you want to have pancakes made out of mealworm powder? This is
Yes.
Yes, exactly. But the problem is that we really have to sell this to the people out there. And we're not going to be able to do that if there's still this apprehension to insects. So that's one of the major pushes behind this approach. Another reason we're doing this, obviously, we're trying to build our community. So it's nice to know that our Mantis community, which is awesome and loving, we can actually reach out and spread information, educate others and stuff. So it's a nice community building exercise. And then also, obviously, deforestation, climate change, all this stuff, all these environmental issues that we're having. Again, it's easier to want to protect the earth or certain ecosystems or habitats when you know what kind of amazing biodiversity exists within it. So again, back to the gateway bug. The mantis is a great introductory or gateway bug. So if you know that, this beautiful habitat of rainforest or something has these beautiful mantises in it, you start making that association. Well, I don't want that habitat to be destroyed or whatnot. So that's
right.
So that's a very important thing to keep in mind while we're doing this. It's not just about the mantises. Obviously, we love them. This is a mantis community after all, but there's so much more we can do with them. And that's why I created this group, because I really feel that as a community, we can get together and do something big with everybody's involvement. So this is why I made this group. This is why I'm doing these kind of things. And this is why you guys are joining me. Okay. So did you have anything you want to add to that, Josh?
Yeah, a few things. Well, I love that you brought up how mantises can impact conservation, because this is a group of insects that for a very long time has been seen by the scientific community as pretty samey and honestly pretty insignificant. I remember reading a lot as a kid the insect books that would go into enormous detail about ants, about flies, about the insects that we know are important agriculturally, that we know are important environmentally, and then some of the smaller orders, mantises, walking sticks, earwigs, they would get sort of a perfunctory treatment of this is an interesting animal, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that important, especially as far as humans are concerned. And I think that something that has been big lately is research into mantises and how they, as a generalist large predator, are impacting their environments. And even from non-bug people, I get a lot of feedback just from teachers, from kids, from parents, about them noticing the mantises in their environment and the abundance of such animals. For any of you guys who grew up in places where there are a lot of wild mantises, you probably noticed some booms in population some years and some drops in population some years. I remember as a kid, the Chinese mantis, still one of my favorite species, and they were just the holy grail of bugs, where if I was finding those outside, I was having a great year. And there would be some years there would be a great many of them, and some years that I would be really lucky when I found one adult late in the season. And I've gotten other people telling me, hey, I haven't seen any mantises in my yard. Like, are they in trouble? Is there something going on environmentally with them? And I think that they make a really great opportunity to talk about how human impacts like pesticides and developments, how the changes in prey populations affect these animals, because they go where their food is, and they go where the safe ooth laying places and the safe perching places are. And people may not necessarily make the connection that if they plant these different plants in their yard, they're going to increase biodiversity a lot. Or if they make a new development, cause a lot of smoke, spray a lot of pesticides, they're going to lose stuff like mantises that they weren't intending to lose. And so I think just by virtue of their size, of their charisma, of how they make this lovely eye contact with you, they really capture people's attention and make them form memories about insects that they wouldn't have formed with something less personable.
That's a very good point. So are you saying that basically, if you see a healthy population of mantises in a habitat or ecosystem, that there's some good balance of fauna going on? Is that what you're saying?
I think that's often the case.
Okay.
There isn't as much research with them as indicator species as there is with things like frogs. But just based on how they're generalist predators who need certain habitat types, like for instance, the native Brunner's mantis. I'm going to get out my baby here just when I talk about her. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Brunner's mantis, they are stinking awesome because they are a parthenogenetic mantis species. That means that they need no males. Every individual is female. And the hardest part of mantis keeping, the mating, in my opinion, is just totally not even a factor with Brunners. This is a baby. She's going to get like 4 times this size when she's mature. But this is a grassland mantis, and they need a sort of undisturbed prairie kind of habitat to really thrive. I remember finding them at one site in Little Rock, whole bunch of them, in this field behind a bowling alley. And I went back 2 years, and I went there looking for this species. I saw the habitat driving by, came back with my net, and swept it through the grass and instantly caught 2 Brunners in one sweep. And I thought, well, okay, I drove out here and got it right away. Like, that's kind of anticlimactic, but also sweet. And so I've been keeping this species since then, and wanted to go back to the field a year ago and see what was there, and I couldn't find anything. I mean, there were grasshoppers and stuff, but it seemed like the amount of human activity in that area had increased, and it had negatively affected the mantis population. I just found a few Chinese there who are a bit more flexible, and the Brunners just weren't even noticeable in the area. They were probably still there, but they're a species that really benefits from undisturbed prairie, from grass, from lots of different prey, because when mantises are young, they eat totally different things as when they're adults. And so you can have a habitat that supports young ones, but the prey there needs to get to a certain size for adults to be present as well. And so I think that they're probably understudied with regards to how they show the health of an ecosystem.
Yeah, and actually, I'm kind of happy that you have Brunners and a cat eyes. I fell in love with these stick species. When I first started the hobby, I didn't think I'd like the stick species, but they really grew on me. They tend to be a little bit more gentle. Of course they get large, and yeah, they really do. And it's really, they're a great species to introduce to someone because you don't have those big, thick raptors that might intimidate some people off. So the twig species tend to be a lot more handleable or easier to show others for educational purposes.
Yeah, and that was a question I wanted to ask you, Ben. What is your favorite mantis to show non-keepers?
Mine would be, so far, the Duraplatus genus has been very good for me. So when people come over, now don't get me wrong, everybody has different tastes and what triggers their fascination. But for me, it's always been Duraplatus. The truncata, the leaf mimicry is incredible. Like when you look at the back of a Duraplatus truncata female, an adult, and they look at it as like, that's a mantis? I'm like, yes, it's a living thing. It's a mantis. And they just lose their minds. But my personal favorite is still the Duraplatus desiccata because it is huge. It still has great dead leaf mimicry, but they're also surprisingly gentle. So they have large raptors and all that kind of stuff, but they move around very
Yeah.
gracefully. They're very. I've never had I can wiggle my finger in front of a Deroplatus discata adult female, and they'll never strike at it for some reason. If I do that in front of a Rhombodera or a Nigomantis or even
Ooh.
some Herodulas, they will go at it. So I tell people
Ooh.
when you're handling, especially if a younger person or a person with small hands is handling mantises, make sure you keep your palm closed, because if you got a rogue digit out there, they might go for it. But I've never experienced it. I always find it fascinating, Josh, actually, that you mentioned that with the Deroplatus desiccata, seem to have a way to tell that something is the kind of prey item they go for or not. And it might have something to do with the fact that they guard their ooth, so that when they hatch, there might be some kind of evolutionary factor that they've become accustomed to saying something this small or something that doesn't move a certain way is not a prey item,
Yep.
and that might help from prevent them from cannibalizing their own. So
Yeah, I've actually read some great research on how mantises track prey, and they look for things moving on the axis of the length, like a worm-shaped object. If it's moving, say my finger, if my finger moves up like this with the length, they perceive that as something more likely to be prey than if my finger moves side to side, because there's plenty of animals like caterpillars and stuff that move this way, but there's no animal that's super wide and moving like this. And so Deroplatus being they really like crawling prey, don't they?
yeah, I do notice Deroplatus don't mind hanging out. Like when my first Deroplatus discata female, I had her in a 12 by 12 by 18 terrarium, and I loved it because I'd walk in the room, like, where's my girl at? I looked in there, and she's like in different places, hiding behind leaves. And females generally don't travel much, and she was fed very well, so I know she wasn't really looking for prey, but she would just be chilling in different areas. I used to take so many pictures of her. So they don't mind hanging at the bottom. They don't always necessarily go to the top of an enclosure.
Yeah, so if they're in nature going after things like roaches, crickets, ground-dwelling prey, it would make sense that a big hand or a floating finger wouldn't trigger that prey response. And that's a really good observation. I like to show people ghosts for the same reason. They have this sweet camouflage, and you can talk about how their camouflage both helps them hide from predators and hide from prey, and people think that's a cool nuance to it, because we always think of camouflage as protecting just from predators.
There she goes.
Girl.
Typical ghost behavior.
This is actually this is a real old female. I am amazed that she's still kicking, but I got her out because I figured she would just be so calm. And ghosts are just so observant and slow moving. Like they're the species that I've been most easily able to bring to people who've never interacted with a mantis before, and they want to hold them the first time, which is so magical.
But never the males, right? Just the females.
Never the males.
The males.
Oh, yeah. The little birds. But yeah, what was I going to say? Just the interactivity of a mantis. For my education programs, especially prior to COVID, I loved having the kids touch the insects. And I've put that on hold for a little while, but plan on bringing it back in the near future. And with some insects, like roaches, like big rhinoceros beetles, it's really easy to have a calm one on your hand, and a kid with 1 or 2 fingers can pet it. But with a mantis, they don't go for that. Most mantises don't like being touched on their backs, and a few of them will tolerate it, but I really like to use them as an exercise, especially with younger kids, to practice being a little reserved, being comfortable with communicating with an animal, interacting with an animal without touching it, and just look at it, just make eye contact. And that, I think, is a special dimension, teaching people that we have to interact with this animal on its terms, not on the way that we want to, and we have to adjust ourselves to help it to be comfortable. And I've got another thing to talk about on that note later, but I think they're a neat dimension because you don't just get hands-on with them like you would something a bit thicker, like a hissing cockroach.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because the last school kid I sent out, it was an adult female ghost mantis, and the teacher was telling me she put it out there on the lid of the 32-ounce deli cup. she put it on the table and was just surrounded by kids. And these kids are like, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, 9 at the most, and they're just rowdy. And
Yeah.
she's like, they I told them that, if they made a lot of noise, it would scare the mantis, and they've never been more quiet than that. So, exactly to the point you just said, yeah. It's
That's so
yeah, and
cute.
imagine it's not like a massive mantis. It's a adult female ghost, so it's not something huge.
Yeah.
But even that size animal was able to captivate, and just kind of draw their attention to these rambunctious kids. So
So
it's exactly what you said to that point. So I absolutely see that. Yeah.
I had another question for you, Ben, on the topic of education
Shoot.
programs. How would you personally, and with Jack's Mantis, how would you like to expand your education efforts?
That's a good question. I didn't think about it too much, but the first thing I want to do is send out these kits. The second thing is COVID. COVID kind of started almost at the smack beginning of when I started this program, so it really put a lot of stuff on the back burner. But now that COVID is slowly, going out, I got my first vaccine. I'm gonna get my second one soon.
Hey,
Yeah,
congrats.
thanks. So once that's done, I'm gonna start going to actual live classrooms, and I think it's a lot more resource friendly. So I don't have to pay for shipping or send out mantises. I can take a wider variety of mantises. I can show multiple times. So that's what I plan on doing here in the North Florida area. And eventually, what I'd like to do is have other breeders or keepers, people experienced with these animals, to go and do that in their home cities. And I'll be happy to either fund them or support them in those endeavors, from the
Oh,
Jack's
that's cool.
Mantis end. So, yeah, because basically everything I make from Jack's Mantis, usually a lot of it goes right into the husbandry or into these kits or any of that kind of stuff. So again, I'm very fortunate. I have a good full-time job, so I don't have to worry about that stuff too much. So I'm very fortunate for that. So I'd just love to get back to the community, do all this cool stuff, and get people, active with the community. But eventually,
Yeah.
the ultimate goal, again, this is a big dream, but it'd be amazing. If I can have an insectarium here in Jacksonville, Florida, that I would love to have that. That would be my
Yep.
perfect insect Jack's Mantis goal. Yeah.
Future dream here
Yeah, there you
too.
go. Maybe I convince you
Yep.
come down here in Jacksonville.
I mean, I love Florida.
Hey, we got a lot of fauna here. I'm sure you don't mind that.
So cool. Yeah. Um, I I also have high hopes for being able to go a bit more professional, a bit more legitimate. But I do think, on that note, Ben, that the financial repercussions of mantis keeping would be a wonderful live stream topic for the future.
Yeah, again, there's no shortage of topics. So yeah,
Oh man,
that'd be a
yeah,
good, uh, definitely a good topic. But let me ask you a question now, Josh. So,
I'm ready.
what is it about mantises to you? How are they most effective in teaching, let's say, biology or entomology, specific or particular to the mantis itself? Not so much in awareness or further, conservation efforts. So, just speaking about the mantis
Ooh,
itself.
yeah. So I really like the insects that are easy to demonstrate, the different things that make insects special. When I talk about insects with kids, I'll often use the framework of superheroes. They have the ability to do things that we can't even dream of doing. They get to see the world so differently. They get to like do feats of strength and speed that are just mind blowing. And mantises demonstrate some of their behaviors really, really well. Um, when I do display style programs where I'll have animals out on the table and people will come up and look at them kind of all at once, um, sort of a museum style way. I like to set out mantis enclosures with cage furniture that really accentuates their camouflage. I'll put a rhombodera in with some broad leaves. I'll put a heterokita, like the cat eye, in with a lot of thick twigs. And there will be a little sign up front with the animal that's in there and just the prompt to look for me. See if you can find me in here. And just the biological notion that animals are doing whatever they can to survive, and that pretty much every adaptation a mantis has is one that has served its great 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 grandparents well, and it's been passed on because of that. Talking about their camouflage is a really engaging way to get people looking for them, and then some can demonstrate even more behaviors. Especially when I'm actively doing programs, I always want to have a mantis which is tong trained, in which I can feed right in front of people. Being able to know that they're most likely going to take that roach that I hold up to them on the tongs when I need them to for the audience is just an amazing feeling. And then after they're taking it, and holding, then I can hold my hand upside down and my big girl can be holding onto her roach and chowing down on it from just 4 thin little legs. And that provides the opportunity to talk about how an insect with their small size, with their exoskeleton and the muscles that are attached to it, how they can be way stronger than people. That way kids can see the mantis having a big prey item from its little legs, and I can just ask them to imagine hanging by your toes from a pull-up bar, and then also eating a hamburger that's as big as your own body. And they imagine doing that, and they can't do it. But the mantises do that every day. And being able to talk about their predatory adaptations, like their big eyes, like the claws on the raptors and the spines, the way that they slowly can stalk up to prey and are aided by the camouflage, those are all things that are really easily visible. If I talk about exoskeleton, I got a nice shield to point out, that hard exoskeleton. And if I talk about antennae, those antennae are never stopping moving. And so I find that with their size and just their body shape, they are really good at demonstrating everything that makes an insect amazing.
Yeah, to your point, you can, obviously what makes an insect is the 3 body parts, right? You have the head, thorax, and abdomen, and you can very easily delineate them. Matter of fact, with the mantis, the head is the most easily distinguishable from the rest, and that's what makes it so special. That's why people gravitate towards the mantis. So that's also a good thing. And another point, and I never even thought about the way you're teaching these kids. That's awesome. Cool. That's cool.
Shed skin.
Yeah. So, but
also nice and visible.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I like the superhero analogy. That's kind of cool. I never thought about it that way. But they are. They're basically superheroes in their domains. They're incredible, and it's cool that they hang so that the prey item, despite being so large, doesn't have anything to put their feet on and have purchase. So that's another evolutionary adaptation. So definitely very, very cool.
Right.
Yeah, and now I'm a big.
They're also.
Yeah, sorry, go on, Josh.
Oh, I was going to say they're also good for demonstrating life cycle. Not as good, I would say, as something like a hissing cockroach, which is going to reproduce without any added work. But with someone who's comfortable with breeding them, you can have babies and adults and egg cases and shed skins all visible all year round. I just had a hatch of baby ghosts, and it's not it's not something that kids have usually ever seen before. Both the hatchling and the adult in the same place. Like sometimes I'll bring an adult ghost and show her off, and then tell everyone, all right, we're going to get one of her babies out who was born last week. And that always gets them really excited. They're going to say, aw, even though it looks like a horrible xenomorph, little monster. They're going to say, aw, because it's a newborn baby ghost. And so they do have a life cycle, which is pretty demonstrable, and also pretty fascinating to see the babies coming out of this little styrofoam looking case.
Yeah, and obviously in the hobby, a lot of people, well, I wouldn't say in our hobby, we've learned to deal with it for the most part in terms of their lifespans, but a lot of people are like, oh, I can never keep a mantis because they just they don't live long enough, basically. But I think that's part of, to me, again, you take care of that by getting more mantises. That's how you deal with that problem.
Yep.
Over time,
right.
They'll die. Like, sorry, buddy. You'll pour one out for the homie, and then move on. So, but I do love that their short lifespans gives a person an opportunity to see that whole life cycle within a relatively acceptable time frame. You know what I mean? It's not like a tarantula or something that can live 20 years, depending on species and the sex of the tarantula, which is incredible. But it's a long term commitment. So that definitely benefits the mantis as well. And just like back to what you mentioned about the morphologies, and just again, before I even got into this hobby, when I thought mantis, I really thought, you think about the Chinese mantis and stuff like that. And I saw a couple when I was a kid. But when you get deep into the hobby and you see the insane amount of variations in their morphologies, their hunting styles, their dramatic behavior, all that kind of stuff, it really is mind blowing. And back to when you mentioned you were at those events where you would showcase your mantises. I did one Repticon so far, and yeah,
Ooh,
and I had I don't know if you guys have been to IKEA, but they have all IKEAs have the same stuff. There's this like wooden guy on a metal pole. It's small. It's about like a foot high or something, and you can move the legs and the arms. What I did on him is I covered him with what's it called, silicone, and then before it dried, I put a bunch of like substrate background on it, so it looked like it was made out of dirt. And then I put some fake
cool.
foliage on it, and it looked like a mantis man moving. But but I had him displayed at the Repticon, and
That's
yeah, I
wicked.
had like maybe six, I don't know, fifth instar ghosts on it, and then people are like, "Oh, cool, what is this?" I'm like, "There's mantises on there," and like, "No way!" And they'd get up right in front of it, and they're like, "Where?" And it's like right there. So,
Oh,
yeah, so the ghosts are just amazing, at camouflage. And again, they spark that interest, uh, that desire. Like that's one of my funnest things is coming into my room, especially my nicer terrariums. I look in like, hey, where are you today? And you try to look around and
yeah.
find them. So I always find that very, very fun. So yeah, that's how I feel. I agree with when it comes to camouflage, they just blow your mind. And it's funny that one of my favorite things in the hobby is trying. I like the fact that I can't find them. So it's kind of funny, but it's kind of fun for me. It's like, ooh, time to, where's Waldo? So yeah, yeah.
It is until you're pairing them and you can't find the male when you get back for a while.
Yes.
And your heart's racing until he shows up on the other side of some leaf. It's like, oh, I thought you were dead.
Oh, God. This is my little buddy here. Let me see if you can see him. That's the little buddy I told you about, Josh.
Oh, it's still a little delayed, but I'm going to see it
Okay,
soon.
yeah, but
Where is
he's
this play?
moving. Yeah, it's delayed. You'll see him in a second here, but he's still moving.
Oh,
Right
good.
before I
Okay.
got on a call
Oh,
with
there he
yeah,
is.
right before I got on a call with Josh, everyone, to test to live stream. I was gonna start stream, then I heard like a flutter behind me in one of my terrariums, and I looked back. I was like, "Oh crap!" One of my truncata females had this little boy in her grasp. She was just about to jump in there and chomp, and I was like, "Nope." So yeah,
Ooh,
we'll see.
that brings me to one more cool education note about
Yeah,
mantises. So I guess I mentioned earlier that they're kind of familiar to people already. A lot of people have seen them or at least know about them. Um, and usually, the one thing that people know about mantises, if they know one thing, is that the female kills and eats the male. And I think that it's a very cool like myth to bust, where you say, what do you already know about mantises? And they all raise their hands and say, oh, she eats him. And then you can talk about how that actually doesn't happen as often as it's made out to be, and add that layer of complexity about, you know, this is why sometimes she eats him. This is what he tries to do, and how he tries to court and be sneaky about it, and how he tries to get away with his life. But the reasons why that isn't just some ridiculous, like, accident of nature, but how that can be adaptive for the female to eat the male still.
absolutely.
And I think it's a behavior that obviously catches a lot of attention, and holds people's interest in them as an oddity of nature. And then to be able to say, okay, you already knew this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's expand on your knowledge here. That gives people a touchstone where they can say, oh, I did know something, and now I know even more.
Yep, that's true. That's true. And speaking of mantis knowledge, I think it's a real shame that in China a lot of the internet is basically blocked off, right? But the mantis in the Chinese culture it's huge. It's a huge part of their culture. So they look at it in a
Yeah.
completely different way than anybody anywhere around the world looks at it. And it's just sad that we can't get in touch with like a lot of Chinese keepers on social media and stuff, and kind of get their perspective and their knowledge and stuff. It makes me very sad. But
Yeah.
that's a topic that's a whole different geopolitical issue there that we're not going to go into. But yeah, so
I remember seeing once someone wrote a proverb about a mantis. I don't remember what country it was from, but it basically went that a praying mantis can never stop a rolling cart, but it will always try. And you do think of one of my first experiences with a wild Chinese mantis was walking up to church, and the mantis was in front, and I thought, oh, that's funny, praying mantis in church. And then it threw up its arms and threw up the wings and tried to stop me from walking any closer on the sidewalk. And I just thought, wow, you are so brave.
yep.
Like I am an 8-year-old boy who could step on you, and and you are going to try to scare me away. And there's a lot, anthropomorphism aside, there is a lot to be impressed by with an animal that it knows that it can't fly away, that it can't run away, so it's going to try and fight you, down to the death.
Hey, that's part of the charm, isn't it? And that's a big reason why we love them so much. So
Yeah.
So we talked about kind of mantises in education for, let's say, for younger kids and stuff, which is important. Do you know of any endeavors or efforts studying the mantis on a higher academic level, like in college or any graduate programs, anything like that?
So this is something that I had put in my things that I've learned from mantises section of my notes. The lessons both about life and just about the insects themselves, that I've picked up as a result of being in this hobby and observing them and reading as much as I can. And that is that mantises are one of the frontiers left in biology.
Mm-hmm.
Like I touched on before, they haven't been studied nearly as much as they should be. And I think that they are a rich field for people who are currently looking for projects, looking for experiments to run, like field studies to be done, have a lot more that they can look into. I know of a few members in our group who are working on either experiments in their own homes or experiments as part of their schooling that focus on mantises. And I've seen several experiments talking about invasive and introduced species as well, since mantises are kind of a conundrum of both very fragile and very resilient. They're able to sometimes establish populations in places where they aren't native. And in the United States, we've got, I think, like 6 species established throughout the country, sometimes by direct human assistance and sometimes by accident. And most of the studies on mantises in the field are about those species. And so their introductions have been a mixed bag. There are a lot of different opinions on how dangerous they might be, how positive they might be for the environments that they're in now. But people got to find out. With anything in nature, you can't just make an assumption and expect it to be good enough. Like, you got to find out. And so I think that those introductions have more or less accidentally sparked a lot of research into mantis ecology, into how they affect other animals. Someone just asked in the chat, what's the best place to find existing research? There are a couple of books that really sum it up very well. I'll post pictures of those in the comments after the stream. But a couple of my favorite books to read. And then also, I can get a lot of good results just through Google Scholar and other like online free article databases, where if I search, for instance, mantis taxonomic key, I'll get a list of species found in places, or and how to distinguish them. Or if I search for something like mantis prey capture article on Google Scholar, and sometimes things will pop up where people have been studying how they triangulate into prey, how they use their binocular vision to focus on things at different distances, how they, for instance, find their mates, whether through olfaction, through vision, through both. And so, Nicole, I would just say to really scour the internet, try some different keywords, get onto some of the free resources like Sci-Hub, Google Scholar, and then those books that I mentioned. But research is hard to find. There are a couple people in the group. Lohit is one of my favorite sources, where if I've got a mantis question and Lohit somehow can't answer it, he can direct me to where I could find the answer. And so if you've got a question that you are struggling to find, just go into the group, and seeing if anybody else has come across this is a great solution too.
Yeah, if Lohit can't find it, I'm like, you know what? I'll leave this for another day. So,
right? I don't know how he does it. We're going to overwork him.
Yeah, I can't imagine how many questions that poor guy gets. Oh, geez. But yeah, so I don't know if you know about this study, Josh, but Newcastle University in UK has actually glued on little 3D lens on the Mantis. I don't know if you heard about that.
Oh, I saw this one.
Yeah, so they're actually so they're the only invertebrate that can see in 3D, or stereopsis, I think it's called, or something like that. But they're using what they're learning from that to hopefully apply that to how to program robots. So yeah,
Ooh.
so again, this is something that you can take. You wouldn't expect that. Oh wow, we're studying mantises and using it in the world of technology. It's amazing. And now I don't know how much has come from that research, but that's what they're aiming to do, because the way a mantis sees in 3D is not the same way a human sees in 3D. So the way we see
Right.
is basically each eye takes a picture, and we basically calculate the differences between those two pictures, and that gives us information. But the mantis needs to see movement. So if a mantis is looking at a landscape and literally nothing is moving, it's seeing a blank screen. It can't tell it's 3D. It's not until that movement's happening that a mantis can tell it can see in 3D. So and all that adaptation is almost solely for hunting. That's why a lot of times if any of you have fed your mantises, right, and the prey item has stopped moving, sometimes you'll see the mantis start swaying from side to side. It's creating that motion for it to be able to gauge the depth perception and all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
very very interesting stuff. In terms of like bug intelligence relative to bugs, mantises are not that intelligent. You almost all intelligent bugs are almost exclusively social bugs, and it's
Right.
completely understandable why. But the mantis has definitely evolved and developed some really interesting behaviors and systems to operate the way they do. So that's really cool. And yeah,
Yeah.
and then for people asking about resources and stuff, I do plan on doing another. And maybe Lohit will host this, but a more academic centric, very very academic heavy,
Ooh,
yeah, academic heavy live stream.
I'd watch that all
Oh yeah,
day.
absolutely. And I know there's a lot of members in our group who are entomologists and study insects, so they would probably love this as well. So, and I'm sure it'll be good for everybody, anybody who wants to watch. So, stay tuned. Again, there's no shortage of topics to do live streams for. Okay, and then in the future, it won't have to be an interview. Maybe Lohit can hop on for half an hour, or answer any questions you have about kind of higher level entomology or insect academic issues or whatnot. So
Yep. If he's watching, we'll have to see if he's up for
Lloyd's
it.
busy. He'll watch this later.
Yeah.
But so I had at least on my side one more question, Joshua. So when you're
Yeah.
teaching insects and animal behavior or whatever to kids, especially with mantises, what are some of the challenges you have, if you have any at all?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, so first and foremost, I think the challenge that comes with anybody trying to learn about animal behavior is to really understand that that animal thinks in a way that's different from us, but also in a way that's very specialized. Um, they do have calculations to make. They do have things to consider. They make decisions. It's just not like the decisions that we make. Um, and there's a principle that we use in zoos when training animals, and that's that, barring a few absolutely ridiculous animals, it's not the animal's fault that it's untrainable. It's the person's fault that we're not approaching that training from the right way. Um, and with mantises, although they are not incredibly trainable, they can do a few simple things so they can get conditioned to learn. Um, it's their behavior. If they're not behaving in the right way as a keeper, we don't need to say, "Oh, why is my mantis broken?" We need to say, "How can we make this animal, feel as though it can behave the way we want it to?" If it's not eating, there's a reason for that. It's not just not eating because it doesn't want to. There's a reason. If it's not breeding, there's a reason. Sorry, big girl. I've got my cat eyes that are just boggling my mind why they will not reproduce with each other. And it's not in the human sense of, oh, we're not a good match compatibility wise. It's something about the environment or the way that I'm caring for them that has not made them feel as though they can breed. And so when that's all very complicated for kids. I don't try to get into that amount of depth usually with the younger audiences. But the way that we have to think about them and why they do what they do is all around their lifestyle, the things that they would encounter. And so when I talk to kids about insects, I really like to have them imagine that they're the insect for a second. I'll do something like, imagine you're this praying mantis. You're sitting on a flower. It's sunny out. You can hear buzzing from bees around that you think probably taste pretty good. But then a big shadow goes over you overhead. What would you do next? And sometimes they would say that they would go under the flower and hide. Sometimes they would say they would run away, or sometimes they'd say they'd try to tell what it was. And if you're a mantis, that's probably a predator. And it gives the kids that little role play, helps them try to get into it. But especially with insects, like you said before, Ben, there's that fear aspect. There's that alien other. And the big hurdle to get over whenever I'm presenting these bugs is why should I look at this thing a second time? Because what we're trained to do by our society is we're trained to either step on it and move on or run the other way because you're afraid. And so for probably the single biggest hurdle that I've found with insects is just getting people to understand why should I care about this animal? And the answer for that's going to be different for everybody. If I talk about conservation, why they should care, some people still won't care about that. If I talk about the beauty of it, some people still won't care about that. And so finding an aspect of the animal that connects to a lot of different audience members can be a pretty big challenge.
You're right. I mean, you only have so much time. You can't,
Yeah.
okay, if you're interested in conservation, it's good. If you're interested in studying locomotion, that's good. If you're interested in doing that, it's hard. So
you only got so much time.
Exactly, yeah. But that's all I had on my end, Josh. So if you had anything else you wanted to ask before we go to questions from the group, let me know.
I think this would be a great time for group questions.
Okay, so I'm gonna start scrolling up from the comments going down. You guys can start posting your questions in the chat, and then me and Josh will go over them and see. Actually, there's one thing I do want to go over before we go over the questions. So you guys continue posting your questions. We'll get to them in just a minute. But one thing I love about education, and this more applies to the higher level academic approach to learning, is data gathering. So what does that mean? The breeders that I respect the most in the hobby, the people that when they talk, I listen every time, are the people that understand the anecdote is not the way to model your husbandry. Okay, this is again, and this literally applies to every aspect and facet of life. Currently my field of work is industrial engineering. That's what I do. So everything is about gathering information, analyzing data, and then making the best informed decision with that. And even if you have good data, doesn't mean it's conclusive necessarily. There's always the conflict of conflating causation with correlation. Correlation with causation. Mm-hmm. So there's always that battle that goes on. How many times do we hear in the hobby? Oh, this one lady posted in the forum that she fed her mantis this, therefore I'm not feeding it. It doesn't work that way. I've had a bad batch of flies that killed a lot of my mantises. Do I stop feeding my mantis flies? No, I still feed them flies. The cricket one is the one that kills me. If anybody knows me enough, I lose my mind every time I hear the demonization of crickets. Okay, Josh, I had a girl once in the group, and she's like, "I hate crickets," and I was like, "Okay, why do you hate crickets?" She's like, "Because they're," and this is a mantis loving person. I'm like, "Why do you hate crickets?" She's like, "Well, they cannibalize." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." But she loves mantises. I don't know. Anyways,
that's fun.
It's funny, but you really have to observe patterns and notice things that happen over a course of time before you make any real husbandry adjustments. Okay,
right.
Unless you know for sure it's something, don't let that. This is easier for me to say because I have several hundred mantises at the very least usually. If you have 1, 2, 3 mantises, I understand completely why you're very scared to try something new or get a wild feeder. Every single husbandry advice has some caveats, and as long as you understand those caveats, you can take risks. And you taking risks also helps the hobby. So one person getting on a forum and saying, "Hey, I'm having problems with this particular feeder," you know what I mean, is not going to help.
Yep.
2 people, not going to help. 3, now you got to start wondering, there might be something there. We need to start looking into it. That's the point. Right. This is why, I ask for people to share their experiences, but you can't just take one person's experience and say, oh, this one person said this. It's not how it works. You need the scientific method. You have to constantly observe and track and record. And, the people, I know people who are in the hobby, like me. I haven't been in the hobby that long. People mistake it. I've been in the hobby since 2018. But I jumped in very hard, as you can ask me. I have since then kept thousands of mantises. I've reached 45 different species now, or almost 45 to 50.
Woo!
Yeah, so something crazy. And because of their short life cycles, I've been able to observe many mantises. From nympho to adulthood and over again. So I know other breeders who also been in it, but same time as me, and the breeders who've been in 10, 15 years, but just you've been in 10, 15 years, but you've kept, 2 or 3 species or not more than 5 at a time. This is still a good experience. Don't get me wrong. I'm not disqualifying that at all. But I know people who've been in for a short amount of time who've really observed the animal, taken notes, all this kind of stuff, and like the amount of information and feedback they give back in husbandry is just invaluable. So that's what I look for when I look for somebody's advice on husbandry. I look for somebody who really has that mindset of understanding that you really have to notice a pattern to make a determination for on care or husbandry. Also, people who, despite having a lot of experience noticing or observing mantises, will still have always a nugget of doubt. Be like, this is what I observed, but I don't know. That's very important to me. That knows that person is always open to learning more or altering their perspective or opinion. Okay, so that's all I got to say. That took a little bit longer than I wanted to. I apologize. So.
No, that's a good lesson.
Yeah. Did you want to see anything on that, Josh, before we get on to the questions in the chat?
I think you covered it pretty well. I mean, if I would take one lesson from that, it's that everybody's experiences are important, but don't base your decisions on one person's experiences. Sharing is the backbone of this hobby. Where if we didn't have people sharing for breeding loans, if we didn't have people who were working on documenting from ooth to adult the life cycles of certain species, everyone would be going from no background. Everyone would have the same low information, but we can add to each other's information. Yeah. I'm waiting to get several species I really want until I've seen enough people who've kept them successfully, who've bred generations, that I know that I'm going to be able to do it right. And so if you ever doubt, like, hey, I had a cool experience, I had a weird experience, like, should I share this? You should share it and be open to what people will have to say as far as, I think that's a fluke, or you might really be onto something.
Exactly. And sharing that experience is good to share it with the mind that this is your one singular experience with this animal or species. So when you have an experience with an animal and you say, oh, it's crazy. It's like somebody might say like Rhombodera are so calm and stuff. And I've kept a lot of Rhombodera at this point. And all the other big breeders I know who kept Rhombodera also say they're crazy and they're insane. Yep. Now, of course, there's variations within individuals, but it takes a lot of sharing to come to a conclusion without any further information. So
yeah, look at this calm, sweet little Megara.
Yeah, look at that.
I can tell you that all of his siblings are not like this.
Well, if you ask Lohit, he'd be like, they don't even belong in that genus. So maybe.
Yep, true.
So we'll see. So I'm going to look at some of the questions, Josh.
Ben,
yeah,
we got a great question for you. Okay. I can answer this for a couple, but for you with your thousands, what are the nymph mortality rates for some of the more commonly kept species?
I'll answer this real quick, but what I'd like to do is start from the top, just so I don't miss any of the questions that were asked higher up, and then we'll move down.
Oh, yeah. I got you.
But again, mortality rates. So when I first started the hobby, I had a lot more time on my hands, and I did take notes. As I progressed, I got a different position at my job. My operation with Mantises grew, and I didn't keep as much record keeping as I'd like to. But what I noticed with nymph mortality rates is really time and effort. So if I'm very, very busy and I can only feed them twice a week, it's better if you can feed them, let's say, 3 times a week, generally speaking. Again, depending on species or mist. So mortality rates depend. It's a lawn will grow green as much as you water it and give it attention, right, or something like that. So
yeah.
But then again, the mortality rates within some species. So I would definitely say species that hatch massive amounts of nymphs easily have higher mortality rates just by sheer numbers. So, and then they probably also hatch that many because their genetic robustness, so to say, is not as strong as other species. Again, like Josh mentioned, some species are just way more robust. Like you look at a ghost mantis, they don't hatch a lot, and but they are insanely robust and very, very hardy animals. Whereas if you have a hatch of Sphodromantis, like the African giant African species, they'll just hatch. It just seems like there's a million of them. You know what I mean? And you'll see a lot die off no matter what you do. So it really is species dependent. But if I would say things that would kill a mantis on the nymph level, is stress is another big one. So if you hatch them in a 32 ounce, if you hatch a Sphodromantis ooth in a 32-ounce container, you're probably not going to be able to see through the container. There's just going to be so many mantises in there. That amount of stress on those insects is going to be super high. So at some point, I'm probably going to show you guys how I hatch mine. I have different hatching setups for different species. So for some of them, I have a net cube put within a plastic sleeve, so it's big. And then within that cube, I hang fake plants from the top, because that's eventually where most of the nymphs go. So even when the nymphs get to the top, there's all this like fake foliage that hides them from each other, and that helps decrease mortality rates and things like that. So again, species dependent, setup dependent, feeding dependent, stress dependent. And I hate a lot of the questions I get asked, unfortunately, are like that. It's like, what is this? Well, it really depends on the species, on the conditions they're kept, etc., and so on and so forth. So, do you have anything to add to that particular question, Josh?
I'm glad that you brought up the thing about different hatch rates having or different hatch numbers having different mortality rates, because when I hatch 20 ghosts, I can reasonably expect to get 15 or more of them to adult. Like that is a tough species. They don't hatch many, but the babies come out and they're pretty competent. When I used to hatch 200 or 300 Tonatera sinensis Chineses from one ootheca, like they're going to have their molting problems that Chinese are prone to. They're going to be killing each other. They're going to be some that just fail to thrive. Like there will be some nymphs that you will do everything right for, and they won't survive for one reason or another. And so I would generally say, if your care is on point, if you're taking a lot of time and effort taking care of them, that you're going to get 60 to 90% of your babies surviving, and that'll usually be on the lower end of that range for the species that hatch hundreds, and the higher end of that range for species that hatch dozens.
Yes, agreed. So covered it pretty well there.
Yeah.
And
a complicated answer.
Yeah, complicated answer. So there's definitely ooths that I've hatched and they all died. And just because I couldn't get the conditions right, or I underplayed the stress aspect, there's again many factors, and again species dependent. So starting from the top, just the questions I had. I think somebody asked if this will be available later.
Will this be recorded?
It will be recorded. So once this is done, it should literally just post up as a regular post with the video in there. So you'll be able to watch this later or reference it whenever you want. Some of you have already seen my live stream with Lohit. I posted that in the announcements. So, and then, go on.
Oh, no, when you're done with that thought.
There's Julie asked, is there an official facial hair requirement for mantis keeping?
Yep, I was about to bring that one up.
I don't know. I didn't notice.
I don't think so. I think a mantis keeper beard contest would be hilarious. But otherwise, like, don't feel pressured to grow it just because you have these guys. Yeah. They don't have beards either.
Yeah, they don't care. We covered Nicole's question about the best place to find existing research, the mortality rates. Okay, I guess we covered all questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll give you guys like one more minute. If you have any other questions, post them real quick. And then, later down the road when this is posted, if somebody's watched it and they have a question, you can always just comment below. And then we can hopefully be able to reference it, come back later in the future and answer any questions you have.
Yep.
So generally speaking,
and I mean,
go on, sorry.
Oh, no, I interrupted you again.
It's hard with the internet to tell who's interrupting who, but generally speaking, I keep these under about an hour long. So we're about at that spot. But yeah, go ahead, Josh. Say what you want to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to say as a final note, of course, if you guys have any questions that you want to specifically ask, about somebody's experiences as, about one of our specialties or things that you think we would really have a good answer for, like feel free to message me. I love answering questions about my zoo experience, about my mantis experience, all sorts of different things for education. And of course that the group is always open, and um, I really love to be able to get on there and sometimes go into a lot of detail, sometimes just answer a quick question. But just don't be afraid to ask questions.
Agreed, and same to me, and same for me. But also, don't forget there's more to the admin mod teams. Don't. It's not just me and Josh. You can reach out to any of us,
Definitely.
or you
Yeah.
just make a post, and then whoever has the knowledge hopefully will come and contribute. Right. So that's all I have for
Yep.
now. Stay tuned. There'll be more live streams, more events, more all this stuff. Okay. Say bye to Josh's Rombadero there. So expect more of this. I hope you guys liked it. I absolutely love constructive feedback and criticism. I am not sensitive like that. If you have hey Ben, I think you messed up here, whatever, you can message me. I don't care. As long as the tone is cool, don't be a douche. We should be fine, right? So reach out to me. Tell me if there's anything else you'd like to see, or how to make this whole process, all these activities a lot more fun and engaging for you guys. But that's pretty much all I have. Thank you so much for joining us, and like I said, we'll be around. Thanks.
See y'all.